Hello, Shiv. Lucknow is beautiful and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for agreeing to be part of Project Bolo. Shiv, when and where were you born? And where did you study?
I was born in 1948, June the 9th, makes me Gemini, in Calcutta, Park Street. I was born from a mixed family. My mother was an Anglo-Indian, Assamese and Scottish. My father was a Bengali who was from Chittagong, but what have you. My mother divorced when I was 2.5, and I went to boarding school in Kalimpong, Dr. Graham's Homes, the very famous Dr. Graham's Homes, and my mother remarried another Muslim who's Punjabi. That's roughly. So the milieu was very much a Calcutta flat in the 1940s, early 50s, and boarding school. And then my family migrated to England when I was 10 years old. And I grew up in England and studied in England and graduated in England.
When did you realize about your sexual orientation?
I have problems with the word of sexual orientation because I come from a social constructionist background rather than an essentialist background regarding sexual desires and orientation. But I knew by the age of 9 what I wanted and what I liked. And this arose from an experience in boarding school in Kalimpong. And by the age of 14, that was fully confirmed that this was my desire, this is the way I was. But there was no name because this was in the 50s and early 60s. There was no real name for that other than this word homosexual. And I never even came across that word. But somehow I felt this was right for me. For me, it was not an issue of being ashamed. I was never ashamed, even at the early age of 9, 10, 11, when I had these desires around my sexual desires. I recognized very early that society did not like what I liked, so I never talked about it.
So, what did you graduate as?
My graduation, I mean, looking at my sort of academic background, I'm basically a nuclear physicist. My bachelor's was in nuclear physics. I took a master's in psychology several years later. So it was a very strange background in terms of the work that I've been doing for the last 20 years. So from science to spiritual philosophy to HIV, AIDS, and sex. I'm a late sex worker.
And Shiv, what was it like for you in England at that point of time?
When I moved to England, I was 10 years old. So I don't know. It was a small country town. How my parents found that place, I don't know. It was not London. It was somewhere outside of London. And when I didn't leave that town until I was 18. There were no gay bars there, so it was very much public cruising. No cottages, no saunas, just parks and a couple of toilets there. In Manchester, where I went to university, yes, there were gay bars. At that time, they were underground gay bars because the law had not been changed. 1967, the law got changed. But those bars were there. And that's how I got to know about it. So I met up with a lot of young gay folks. And I was part of that, got involved with that area. And then in the second year, I was broke. You know, in England, we get a government grant to go to university. And moving into the gay scene, I suddenly was conscious of the clothes that I was wearing and the style of my life. And I realized I have to spend more money. So I spent my grant, which is supposed to last 3 months, in 1 week. You know. So how do I pay my college fees and pay my rent? So I sold sex for a year. Being the only Indian sex worker in that town at that time gave you a sort of financial advantage because you were seen as an object of desire because of your brown skin. So I made more money than the other boys.
What about your parents? Did you talk to them about yourself?
If you call sex talking, I suppose I did. I started sex at a very early age, you know, like boys tend to do. My mother found out when I was 14. And we had a discussion, very adult discussion between my mother and myself, that this is the way I was, and if she didn't like it, well, there's nothing I can do about it because I'm not going to change. I come from a large family of 7 brothers and sisters and then myself. So my mother had 8 children, and I'm the eldest. And we had a family conference when I was 19, because at that time, that's when I came out, in the sense that we would understand coming out. My little sister, who was 6 years old at the time, said, "Can I have a cup of tea, please?" It was incredible. The family didn't care. My mother's only concern in front of the family was, please don't go out of the house dressed in a sari. I said, that's not who I am, so do not worry about that. Because in those days, this was the hippie days. This was the 1967, 1968, everybody was wearing frilly shirts. So I used to wear makeup and perm my hair and wear these incredible bright clothes. But she thought I'd convert into some sort of dress or sari or something or other. And that's not who I am. I'm not a woman, I'm a man.
Did you ever have any conflict about feminine, masculine issues?
For me, there was no issue around being feminine or masculine. I was just a man. And I desired other men.
During this time, did you ever visit India?
I had never returned to India since we moved in 1958, 57, 58. I went to live in the States for 5 years and do work there. And then enough was enough, and I said I had time to go back home. But I didn't want to come back to England. And nothing because of what I was seeing, it was the smell. I don't know if you can't remember the 1985 smell, Santa Cruz Airport, which is cow dung, smoke, wood, and people, sweat. That incredible smell that you get. You don't get it very much in the new Bombay airport, but in those days it was very strong. And I was staying in Bombay, then it was called Bombay, and in Juhu, with some Christian family, who was given to me by my old school in Kalimpong. And I went to Juhu Beach, and that was the most incredible experience. My first sexual encounter with a real Indian, if I can say. Before there was all white people. Suddenly I'm with my own people. And that changed my life forever. Really changed my life forever. So, going on to the story, then we go back to England after a year. And I said, I've got to meet other Indian gay people. I don't know any Indian gay people. I need to meet them. I'd gone to some of the black, in quotes, gay clubs and black groups, meeting groups, social groups, but no Indians, or no South Asians for that matter. Now, so this is stupid. They've got to be somewhere. So I started to meet up with some South Asian gay activists, one of them being Sunil Gupta. And we talked about the idea of setting up a specific South Asian lesbian and gay group to create a space which was our own. And out of that, I set up the group called Shakti, which then became a very large South Asian lesbian and gay organization. Back in 1988, June the 11th, 1988, we had our first meeting in a pub called The Angel, at The Angel. And I began to get, that's when I got really engaged in social activism. The idea being that...
Was it difficult accessing the South Asian queer community in UK?
In the UK, and I think it's true in a lot of countries, migrant communities tend to be more conservative. Now they're battling several things. They're battling the racism of the host culture. They're battling around the issue of being a minority. So the pressure on getting married and having children and conforming to community norms is extremely intense, much, much more intense than here. So the gay men that I was meeting for Shakti, even though this was in the late 1980s, were either young or married. And eventually everybody recognized that they would have to get married. I was very fortunate that I did not have to get married because my family were very, very supportive. One other thing is that I was also different. I came from a mixed religious, mixed ethnic background. The South Asians living in the UK were very specific. They were Gujaratis, they were Punjabis, they were Bengalis, they were Pakistanis, they were Tamils, they were not South Asians. There was no sense of a South Asian identity. There was ethnic identity based on their geographical location. And that was another hard issue to work with, to try and bring the sense of South Asian identity together. So if you have a Gujarati gay man and a Punjabi gay man, how do they relate with each other from an ethnic point of view? And I was lucky because I could step outside of that because of my own background. So I've used my background, my personal background of multi-religions and multi-ethnicity, again as a mechanism to understand some of these cross-ethnic issues.
How long were you with Shakti?
I stayed with Shakti since 1988 to 92, 93. And the reason I left Shakti was then, that's another little story. I was asked by one of these large voluntary organizations providing home care services for people living with HIV, whether I knew any Muslim gay men who would be willing to act as a buddy. Now, I knew a lot of Muslim gay men, but none of them had the courage to act as a buddy, either to come out or to act as a buddy. So okay, I will help this guy. This guy's name was Nazir, Nazir. My experience with Nazir was very painful, partly because he became infected through having sex with another man. His family found out he was gay, so his wife and children threw him out. His mosque threw him out, so he's very isolated. And then racism again played a role, because a lot of the white folks would not come and see him, or he had no white friends. And then when he died alone, without any support from anybody, apart from what we could provide through Shakti. And that response made me so angry that I said, we have got to do something beyond just having discourse and social groups and what have you. So that's when I set up Nas Project, taking his name as a... And the advantage being that Nas also means pride. So be proud to be a gay man, be proud if you're HIV positive. There's nothing to be ashamed about. So it served a dual purpose.
Shiv, tell us more about NAS and its activities.
In '92, I came to the second International Conference on AIDS in Asia and the Pacific in Delhi, and got engaged with other South Asian people, particularly Indian people living as gay men. And that sort of began to inspire me to do some work using my NAS project as a base in India, at that time only India. So in '93 I got some money and we organized the first seminar on lesbian and gay issues in India with Geeti and Anjali in Delhi. That was in '93. In '94 I got some money and we did a joint conference for HIV and gay men in Mumbai with Humsafar Trust and NAS project. So I began to explore how could we do some work here. And I didn't know anything about Indian sexual culture at that time. I just knew there were gay men around and doing their stuff. In '95, I met up with a group, the first time I met up with a group of Koti-identified men as sex workers in a park in New Delhi. And I began to listen to their stories. And that was another significant event, because I suddenly understood that there was other people who were at risk around same-sex behavior, who were not gay identified, who were working class, who were very poor, who did not speak English, who did not access the internet, who were semi-literate, and were primarily coming from rural areas and migrating to work in the urban areas. And I said, I found what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So in '96, I broke NAS up into two organizations. NAS Project became two organizations. One specifically to work in the UK, and that became independent and did their own thing. And one to work around Koti type of men in South Asian countries. I was able to secure funding from Ford Foundation to do the first study on male-to-male sex in Bangladesh. And I did that study in '96, '97. We interviewed 400 Koti-identified guys in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. And then out of that came the first organization that I really formed specifically around MSM, which is Bondhu Social Welfare Society, which has now become a national organization, very big and very powerful and very strong. Very nice success story there. In '97, I got more money to do a study in Lucknow. And we did a similar study in Lucknow, much smaller town, 3 million people in Lucknow, but same 400 interviews. And out of that came Barossa, which is a small CBO, which has now become very successful in UP, Uttar Pradesh.
But was it difficult to access these communities?
Sexual networks in India are very easy to access. If you know the body language, you know where to go. I mean, you can sit in any park, in any place in India, and within 5 minutes, if you clued in, you can meet 100 of these guys. It's so simple. They'll come to you or you go to them. It's not hard at all. It's not like the gay culture where you have to have a very specific entry code, so to speak, what you call gaydar. Here, you don't need that. It's just, you can do it on the street here. You know who's what.
What was the HIV prevalence?
male-to-male sex was so prevalent. Why compared to the West? Why is it such high rates? And I was trying to analyze this as to see why is it so easy to find a man in our countries compared to America or UK or Germany, where you have to go to specific sites. And I suddenly started realizing that there are several issues here. One is cultural. Women are more policed. It's very hard to find girlfriends for sexual partners. Very difficult to find sexual partners. Maybe now it's easier for certain Indians, but certainly where I was working then it wasn't. There wasn't this division in men between what they do with their bodies and who they're doing it with, whether it's to do with a female or a male. There wasn't this sort of antagonism between I'm doing homosexual sex or I'm doing heterosexual sex. I'm just doing sex. There's this whole concept of masti that became visible to me, that, you know, this is not sex anyway, so I can have a lot of fun and it's not sex anymore. Only sex is when I do with my wife. All of that was staggering to me. And when you started calculating the numbers, you realize that male-to-male sex is very, very common in our countries for a whole host of reasons compared to Western countries, which meant that the risks of HIV transmission generally was much higher in our countries than, say, in the UK or America. Unless we can change the construction of the way we see gender, sexualities, masculinities and femininities, we are never going to deal with this issue of HIV effectively amongst the people. It's easy amongst gay men because they don't confuse these things together. But having a gay identity is very much linked to class and income. It's not a generic framework. The advantages of my education, my multi-religious background, my multi-ethnic background, my anger at how we are being treated as people, as human beings, all of that sort of became like a souffle, well-cooked souffle. Maybe that's not the right imagery to use, but the thing is that you brought your focus of attention to a problem and you were being able to analyze it and break it down. So I could actually see things both in its connectivity and analyze it more effectively and say, this is the way we should respond to that particular issue.
What has been the journey like after setting up Bharosa?
So October 2000, we opened the center up with support from UP SACS. This is important. And we organized a little dinner, and UP SACS came and said very nice things and took photographs, and they went away. In the meantime, I'm traveling backwards and forwards from London. July 2001, I get the news. I'm in London doing work. Arif has been arrested with a couple of his colleagues. The police report was talking about running a brothel here, and I was selling boys abroad. They'd found a visa form in Arif's room. So I'm selling boys abroad. And I said, where's the money? Oh, sure. Where's the money? Where's the brothel? And it turned out that that final charge was that we were aiding and abetting the breaking of Section 377 in terms of condom distribution, BCC materials. We were promoting an illegal activity. Those were the charges. Aditya and Lok Prakash took on the responsibility of coordinating the legal response. And they were followed by the police everywhere when they were in Lucknow managing all of this. Arif's family was harassed by the police. Other families were harassed by the police during this period of time when the boys were in jail. And they were in jail for 47 days. It took us 47 days to get him out of jail, even though the charges were bailable offenses. We could not get bail because the magistrate, the local magistrate, was saying this is a crime against society and this would be very bad to release these boys. I was going to come back to India, but I was warned by my lawyers in India that if I came back, there was a strong likelihood that I'd be arrested. And it'd be better if you stayed in London. So I took my lawyer's advice and stayed in London, negotiated everything over the telephone, provided support to Arif's family and the other boys' families, and just counseled them, trying our best to sort these problems out through Aditya. And Aditya and Lok were brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. They coordinated the legal responses. They got a couple of top shot lawyers, advocates from Delhi to come to Lucknow and take the case through court. It was a real struggle though, to get those guys out. We filed charges with the Human Rights Commission, which were investigating it. All sorts of things we did. The end result, in a way, has been very positive. For number one, the 2001 event triggered off the action against 377. It really was the key turning point to do something. It mobilized nationally. Okay, our guys had to suffer for that, the end result. Secondly, we have a good working relationship now with the local police and with UPSAC and the state police. NACO, in 2006, Sujata Rao is the Director General. And we organized the first Asia-Pacific Conference on Male Sexual Health in Delhi. $1 million conference, 400 people, 400 and something odd people came to that conference, 25 major donors, governments from Asia-Pacific. NACO, Sujata Rao stands up and says, in public, for the first time, 377 should be repealed. I think that, and getting the Secretary of Health, who was retiring admittedly, to also stand up and say the same thing. So I think NFI through that has actually made a significant impact through the 2001 event, plus all these other major events.
And what has been the work since then?
The 2001 event had a significant impact globally and regionally and nationally. Not only from NFI's point of view, but I mean, look at the groups that got together, that eventually came to Voices Against 377 and all the other advocacy groups that began to be working around repeal of 377. I don't think that would have happened so quickly and so solidly if there hadn't been a 2001 arrest in Lucknow. So it also opened the doors to NFI's work, particularly in India, where we gained a lot more credibility because of the responses that were evolving out of that 2001 event. It was good for NFI internationally because we got a lot of publicity. And publicity is always good if you want to raise money. So I think that the trials and tribulations that Arif and his staff and the guys who are working with NFI, and now Arif is working with an organization called Mane's Foundation, which has taken on the responsibility of doing all the India work that NFI was doing. And Mane's Foundation, which is the one Arif is now working with, is our national partner. In Bangladesh is Bandhu, which we set up in '97. Sri Lanka, its Companions on a Journey, which was set up in '95, and came out of the HIV conference we held with Humsafar Trust in '94. Blue Diamond, which was started in Nepal, which is starting in 2001. We have just set up the first national MSM organization in Pakistan. We're working with the Ministry of Health to set up an organization to deliver health services to men in Afghanistan. Bhutan, we're working with the government in Bhutan, 700,000 people there. Trying to find MSM in Bhutan is very strange. But they want to set up an MSM service there, run by MSM themselves. These are huge. I mean,
Shiv, what are the changes you have seen in the past 20 years?
it has changed for some people. And it's changed, you know, gay identified men, I think, and I'm sorry if I'm upsetting anybody here, gay identified men are extremely privileged. To be able to say, I'm a gay identified man, they're privileged by class, they're privileged by education, they're privileged by their salaries and what have you. They have the ability to say no to marriage. No, I will not cause problems for other human beings. Most MSM are not gay identified. They don't come from that economic bracket. It is very hard to say no to your mother and father when they're saying you have to get married. What choices does a man and a woman have in an environment where there are no choices to say no? Either the woman and the man has to leave their family, then what happens? They're extremely vulnerable then.
Shiv, when you say the situation of MSM has not changed in 20 years, how does that reflect on your work and all the work we have been doing?
We have impacted on the lives of thousands and thousands of people who now have a place to say this is our space. So from a psychological point of view, there has been an improvement. In terms of condom usage, we've hit a barrier, and we need to look at why there's barriers, but it's a global barrier. HIV is increasing in the States again amongst gay men, in the UK, in Australia. In the Western world, HIV is rapidly increasing amongst young gay men. So it's not an issue specific to South Asia. The number of services have grown tremendously. Hamsafar, Sahodaran, Naz India, Barossa, Maan, they've all had a significant impact. They have made it possible to publicly talk about gay men and MSM and HIV. They've made it possible for the government to fund programs, to deliver health services. But can I ask you this question? How long did it take you to stop smoking? How many years did it take you to stop smoking?
It took me 28 years.
Right. Now convert smoking into using a condom. We have the knowledge. I still smoke. And even though the cigarette pack has these horrible pictures of cancers and all that, I say, bugger it, I'm still going to smoke. Changing behavior is not logical, it's not rational. It requires a whole host of things to enable us to change our behaviors to less risky behaviors. Using a condom is a major shift in thinking for men.
Shiv, what are your priorities now?
Some countries that we work with, male upon rape is as high as male upon female rape. The great silence. How do we address prison violence, where boys get raped in prison? I don't hear much conversations about that in terms of HIV even. The whole nature of society we need to look at. So I want to talk about the larger things as well as the smaller things. When the boy who comes into the office and says, I have been thrown out of my home, what do I do? I've been beaten up by my father because I'm a Koti. What do I do? I had a discussion with Geeti Thadani years ago that promoting condoms, here's a philosophical argument, promoting condoms is actually promoting gender-based violence, or something similar to that, in that by promoting condoms, we're encouraging phallic-centric masculinity. And that what we should be looking at, instead of promoting condoms alone as a way of reducing risk, we should be looking at non-penetrative sex as means of pleasure. Condom promotion, this is anti-whatever thing, but condom promotion promotes a phallic-centric type of view of men and women and men and what have you. And that we should find a new way of looking at sex and sexualities.
You've been working and traveling so much. Does it leave time for your personal life?
No, I fall in love. I have a partner. We've been together for 7 years. And I'm content with that. I live a very contented life. My work and my life are synonymous. Because I don't see it as work. What I would like to do is to have more time to write. I've written 6 books sitting there behind you from the 1980s. I've got 1 million words, and there's another 1 million words or so that I want to write on philosophy, on spirituality, on sex and sexualities.
Shiv, from where you started and where you have come today, how's been the journey for the last 20 years?
Strange. In the 1980s, early 1980s, I used to be a teacher of meditation, spiritual development, and psychic awareness. I used to teach people how to read tarot cards and how to do what they call nowadays auric healing and laying on of hands. I used to do all of that stuff. How to find peace with yourself, how to center yourself, how to find some sort of connection with the larger universe. We all have responsibility for ourselves, but we also have responsibility for other people as well. Not only our neighbors and our children and our wives and our parents, but for all the people in the world. You do the best that you can do to share that responsibility, not by leading them, not by following them, but by being with them.
You have so many ideas, and you are so many different people. Who is the real Shiv?
I'm an ex-scientist. I'm an ex-teacher of meditation and psychic and spiritual development. These are all Shivs. I was in advertising for a little while. I've cleaned roads and washed toilets and done all that sort of dirty work as a student. All of those elements make who I am. And I'm operating, at my age now, 63, all these disparate parts that form a whole. So Shiva is all of these things. But I look at the world through eyes that comes through my history, through my understanding, through my philosophy. And you know, Geminis are like actors. We shift roles. Okay, an example, give you a real life example. I'm in England, living and working in England, particularly in politics when I got into Develop Shakti. At one level, I was a British person. I have a British passport, I'm acting as a British person. At another level, I'm a South Asian person. At another level, I'm an Indian. At another level, I'm an Indian gay man. And at another level, I was a black man. Now, which role do I play where? And it all depends on my audience and what I wanted to say. So you're always shifting. You do. When you're with your parents, you're one person. When you're with your boyfriend, you're another person. When you're a Ashok, you're a third person. Right here, you're a different person. You're not the same person all the way through. We're always performing. And even sex, we perform. You know, you perform in this role, that role, whatever role you want to play. That's life. It's making sure you track all those performances and they make some sort of sense and some sort of continuity. So yes, who is Shiv? It's all of me and none of me. I'm a Kali woman in a sense. That's how I see myself. Who's the real Shiv? Yeah, I'm a Kali woman. You know, sort of.
Sir Shivananda Khan, thank you so much for being part of Project Bolo. I'm really honored and privileged.